Hi, everybody. Can you hear me slash see the presentation? Hi, everybody. Can you hear me slash see the presentation? Okay, perfect. All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Felicia, Anita, Kay. Thanks very much for being my mod for today. Shannon, if you're still around, Jocelyn and Devin, and everybody else who's out there. My name's Joe. I write under a pen name, Dirk Van Houten, uh, sometimes. And I am the founder slash owner slash only person who works for does anything with Six Cats Press, a small little company that I started that's based on my own little cat family. Today I'm going to be presenting a talk about writing 10,000 words a day using Rachel Aaron's 2K to 10K method. So let's get started. All right. So in the military, we always put the bottom line up front. So here it is. Using Rachel Aaron's 2K to 10K method, which consists of three aspects: knowledge, time, and enthusiasm, I was able to drastically increase my word count on my current slash, well, the draft that I had in progress over Christmas when I actually wrote the thing. And I maxed out at 11,390 words in 5.5 hours. And you can use this method too, and I'm going to show you how, or at least give you an idea. So before we start, this is not my original idea by any stretch of the imagination. The 2K to 10K method was created by sci-fi fantasy author Rachel Aaron in 2011. And the story about how it was created was she had just got a publishing deal for her first series, the Eli Mon Press series. And she had, of course, as all people with book deals do, a deadline. And so she quit her job and she turned pro. She just had a baby. And so she got a babysitter so that she could free up time to write. And she found that she wrote the same amount after turning pro um, than she did originally before she turned pro. And of course, that found made her really depressed. And so she realized that the way she'd been thinking about writing was all wrong. And she came up with this method. So the most key part of this is tracking your word count because this process uses your own writing data to analyze the best and most productive way for you personally to write. So what I do in my Scrivener and what Rachel Aaron recommends, and she even has a template on her website, rachelaaron.net, I believe, that you can go check out if you use Scrivener. But basically, what you're going to want to do is create a small chart on your title page or somewhere in your notebook if you're a person who likes to write with pen and paper. And the critical parts you want to have are the dates, the location, the time you started, the time you finished, your total word count. Now that's a progressive word count, so you'll start at 0 and then you'll end at however many words. And then your delta word count. And I'm a person who likes math symbols because I don't like writing out a bunch of stuff. So that delta just means change. So that's your change in word count. So that would basically be your total word count minus the word count from the session previous, and then your average words per hour, and then notes because you're going to want to note down some stuff as you go. So the 2K to 10K method is quite simple to use, uh, but it will change the way you write, and it'll change the way I wrote. Well, it will. It did change the way that I wrote. Back in university, I was one of those people who, they'd say, "Oh, write a 1,500 word paper on, I don't know, some generic thing in my theater degree, like why Shakespeare is the best," even though I disagree wholeheartedly with that proposition. But I could only write maybe 300, 400 words, and then I was out of things to say. And I thought I would never be able to write long form fiction, much as I tried. I tried writing stories, nothing ever worked. And finding this method, it literally changed my life, and I've used it for every single book that I've written so far. And as of now, I've written four, one of them published. So the way you think about this 2K to 10K method is it's a triangle. And on the first side of the triangle, you're going to have knowledge. What is knowledge? Knowledge is basically knowing what you're going to write before you write it. So the way you do this is you take a notebook, or if you're in Scrivener, this is what I do. I just use the little in your scene. There's a little note section off on the right hand side, and I take about 5 minutes and just write out a quick summary of what I'm going to write. So this is not writing it in words that you're going to want anyone to actually read one day. It's basically you know, character X walks into the bar. Character X finds the bartender and starts talking to them. They talk about the weather, and then the heist happens, and they get robbed, and then the cops come, and then. Um, yeah. So the point of this is to make sure that you're using your right of time efficiently. So I find, and a lot of people will find, and maybe you'll find, that the hardest part of writing is coming up with what happens, especially if you're not a like highly detailed plotter, like I don't know, like some of those plotters who will write out 1,000 pages before they even start, which is very much not me. Um, so the hardest part of writing, you don't want to do that while you're actually writing. So if you can think in your head, okay, the scene I'm going to write today, I want to write, X, Y, Z, this, and this, and then you've kind of got your head thinking already, and that helps you once you actually start writing. Wait, I'm a pantser. This is still going to work for you. I would say I'm basically a plantser. So for pantsers, you still have your creative freedom and creativity. This isn't plotting by any stretch of the imagination. What this is basically it's like using a lens to focus your creativity for what you're about to write. You're still going to come up with what's going to happen. You're just doing it maybe a little bit sooner than while you're actually writing out like dialogue and descriptions. If you don't like what you came up with on the notebook phase, you can still change it. And I often find, as you know, I use the little notebook session at the beginning of my writing session, and I write out what's going to happen, boom, 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 boom. And then once I start writing, things change, and that's perfectly okay. If you are a pantser, I suggest you try this method. If it doesn't work for you, maybe think that there's some other way that you can kind of decide what you want to write before you're actually sitting down and banging out the words on the keyboard, and see if you can get that sort of same idea. And if it doesn't work for you, you don't have to use it. So what I find, and what a lot of people will find who've used this method, is that the knowledge portion of the triangle has the most impact on increasing your daily word count. The second leg of the triangle is time. Do you know how you write? This is a quite legitimate question from me to you. Do you know how you write your books? Because a bakery knows exactly how they bake a cookie. They know how long it takes. They know what the recipe is. They know what temperature their oven needs to be. They know how many cookies they can make in an hour. That's how they can set what their prices are. They know what their costs are. And there's no real reason that we shouldn't think about writing the same as any other professional. Like, could you imagine sitting down and hoping that a book flies out of your keys? Like, could you imagine a lawyer doing that? No, they're going to know everything down to the minute. So this is what the time aspect is for. So what I want you to do is to do a little bit of an experiment. Now, oh, I went to AWC and then Joe gave me a bunch of homework. Trust me, this is going to be helpful if you can find the time to do it. So what you want to do is find out what time of day you're most productive. And this might surprise you. The second step is you want to know what location that you're the most productive. And then step three is what music or other environmental factors make you the most productive. And that's where that note section on the word count chart comes in so handy, because you can easily track on this day, I wrote this many words, I was here, And this is what I was listening to, or this is what I was drinking. This is what I was thinking about before I walked in. I did exercise 20 minutes before. I'm planning to do exercise afterward, and it makes me super motivated. Whatever works for you. Um, what we want to do here is identify the combination of factors that make you the most productive. So, for your homework, over the next week, or pick a week, or pick you could do this over a series of weeks. But try writing for at least 3 hours between midnight and 8, 8 and 12, 12 and 4, 4 and 8, and 8 and midnight. We all have a time where we think that we're the most productive. I used to think I was most productive between 4 and 8. Turns out I'm actually more productive between 6 and 12. And wouldn't know that if I hadn't tracked my hours and my word count. Once you've figured out the hours where you're the most productive, in the next week, try writing those hours in different locations. At least half of them should not have internet, if at all possible. If they do have internet, turn your internet off. This means your phone, and see which location increases your word count. So, places to consider: a different room in your house, if you're a house writer, a coffee shop, library, a public space like a food court. If you don't get sick, public transit. I've written a lot of stories on trains and planes. If you're traveling, right on the bus, right on the plane, right on the ship, right on the whatever you're doing, and see if you can find the location where you are that you are the most productive. If you happen to change a location, say you go on vacation, start over again. Hey, like for me, I like to write on cruises. I have to find my spot on the cruise ship that it works. So now that you know when and where you're the most productive, it's time for the final touches. So many people have other little details that make them be productive. For me specifically, it's music. So if you listen to music while you write, try changing it up a little bit. Think of different genres, put on a different playlist. If you are silent, if you only write you with silence, try adjusting the overall noise or silence. You could try white or pink noise, put it down super low, and just let it play in the background. You could try different environmental sounds. You could try using a fan, and then comfort. Try sitting different types of chairs in different parts of the room. Try using a cushion. Try not with a cushion. Temperature. Try changing it. Make it hotter. Make it cooler. Have a fan, and then drinks. A lot of people will drink as they're writing. Try different kinds of drinks. A lot of people will want to do like coffee, tea, wine. Try doing something different. Try doing like soda water. Try doing flat water if you like soda water. The point of this is to find what helps you be the most productive. The final side of the triangle, after knowledge and time, is enthusiasm. And this is probably one of the most, smash your head on the desk, duh moments, at least that I found. If writing feels like you're pulling teeth, you're doing it wrong. If you know what you're going to write and you know your most efficient time, now you have to love what you write. So for me, when I first started using this method, I found that I was the most productive when I was writing what Rachel Aaron calls candy bar scenes. And those are the scenes that you first thought up. This is your climax. This is your first time the lovers meet. This is your, the wedding, whatever your genre is. Oh, the first time they use magic. This is the stuff, the scene that you wrote all that other stuff to get to. So the trick here is make your entire book candy bar scenes. You've got no room for dull scenes. Have every scene be a winner. And in order to do that, you kind of have to think about what you're going to do so that you see how this builds on what you're doing. So builds on your knowledge and your time. So your enthusiasm is the next part. So what's the real point of all of this? It's to work faster, to be more efficient. You don't have to literally write 10,000 words a day to be successful. The 2K to 10K Pro it is a process, a little bit like a formula, but it's also a mindset. Because once you've doubled your word count, say you write 500 words a day, and you're like, that is the most I can possibly do. The day you write 1,000 words in a day, you're gonna feel like an incredible high, and your book is going to start eating at you, and it's going to make you want to write more. And that is all what this is really all about. You double your word count, triple your word count. go from 2,000 words a day to 10,000 words a day. So this is my draft that I wrote over Christmas, and I'll give you a minute here to sort of see where it started. Now, I did start almost 20,000 words in on this, um, and that is because this was the first time I'd written multiple POV. I wrote it first person, present tense, and past tense because it's kind of there's splits between a romance sort of story and a thriller sort of story, and it also um, is the most complicated plot that I've ever written. It's very political. So for me, this was actually a really hard book to get into. So I did start before I went on my trip, writing down just enough to make sure that I actually had a grounding in who my characters were and what the world was. I did write this on a cruise. So I basically went from 18,000 words at the start to almost 80,000 words by the end. And you can see, really, I only really wrote, 8-ish days. Um, you can see how I was in my location section, how I was finding different spots. And then once I found that decade act worked, that's where I kind of parked myself afterward. And you see, once, I that on the 5th of December, I hit 10,000 words a day. And then I wasn't sure, how things were. So I ended up trying various other locations just to make sure I was in the right spot. I wasn't quite as productive. So after there, I parked myself right after that. And you can see I'm mostly writing in my window of between eight and noon. Um, However, because I was on vacation with my mother, I had to also accommodate her schedule. So there were some times where I wrote outside of my typical most productive time. And then on the 10th of December, between 8 and 1:30 ish, I wrote 11,390 words. So that's 5.5 hours, 11,000 words. Um, that is what my chart looked like at the time. I've done some upgrades to the chart, which is what I put at the very beginning. But you can sort of see how this method really worked for me. And so I swear by it. So, in summary, and I know I'm way early on this, but hopefully we can have some good Q&A. What you want to do to double your word count is leverage your knowledge, time, and enthusiasm. Know what you want to write before you write it. Find the day, the time of day, the location, and the overall environmental and other factors that make you the most productive. And then finally, love what you're writing. Okay, now I'll flip it over to you folks. What are your questions? And please don't tell me I spoke too quickly and none of you understood any of what I said because I mumbled. Uh, okay. Can this method be used in any genre? This method can be used for anything. I used it at work when I had to write a briefing note about a subject. So I used it for nonfiction military writing. I've used it for writing an email to my mom. I've used it for writing an email to my wife. I've used it for writing a story, writing a poem, all sorts of stuff. So not only can it be used for any genre, it can be used for anything. Any other questions? Um, I suggest tracking your homework weeks by using that word count chart at the beginning. So let me just go back to that chart that I had there. Oh, there it is. So let me hide that and get myself out of the way. So again, you're going to have your date and your location. So that'll be tracking and then your start time and finish time, and that's your time of day. And then in your notes section over here, this is where you'd write, I drank tea today. I drank soda water today. I worked at, I don't know, a different, I worked in a different chair. I worked with a hard chair. I worked with a soft chair. I worked in the couch. I worked laying down in bed. I worked by walking and dictating. So, like, all of those are valid ways to write, obviously, and valid things that you can try for your homework. If, oh, this is a great question. So, if you only have the ability to write in one spot, which absolutely is a legitimate issue to have, lots of people have very little time. Like for me, a lot of the time I only can write in my office right before work. So I go there super early to do that. And so one of the things that you do there is what I would suggest there is really focus on those environmental factors, focus on your white noise, focus on your time of day, focus on your um, on you know, like your chair, hard, soft, have a fan, sit by a window, sit away from a window, just change things up to find what makes you productive. And it could very easily turn out that what you are already doing is the most productive and you just found that naturally. But the only way to really know is to try different stuff. And if your word count goes down, then go back to what you were doing. And that's totally okay. Any other questions? What would I suggest if someone gets discouraged by having multiple distractions in the household for those that have family or kids? Try to, this is where your time of day maybe makes sense to try changing up. So this could be one of those opportunities to write before other people wake up, write when they're at school, right after they've gone to bed, and see if any of those times make you more productive. Ultimately, the unless you are able to be productive while being distracted, my suggestion would just be to find times where you are able to be distraction free and then find out which of those times is the most productive for you. um, if you're discouraged, ultimately I think that goes back to your enthusiasm, and just when you start writing quickly, you start to really start the book starts eating at you, or at least it does for me. And it's all you can kind of think about and you get super into it, and it becomes like a craving to write. And so once you get to that spot, um, then I think even with distractions, and even if you get pulled away from time to time, you're still going to want to go back and get more words done when you can. Ultimately, people have lives. This is not a one size fits all kind of solution, and there are definitely elements here that could increase your word count even if you can only write for 20 minutes a day. In fact, I think on my chart here I wrote, yeah, so in 26 minutes I wrote 2,500 words. So even if you only have that 20 minutes, 2,500 words, if you were going from 500 to 2,500, that's still a huge increase in your word count. And that, and ultimately that's what this is all about, is making you more efficient. So it is totally possible to use this method in tiny slices of time. Are there any other questions? So yes, when I'm drafting, like when I'm writing my drafts, I absolutely track 100%. I don't happen to have, in fact, I might be able to pull up my Scrivener file. Just give me one second. I'm going to pull up my Scrivener file from a different project and see if I have my chart on it still. Just give me one quick second here, folks. Okay, let me see if I can. Sorry, one sec. I think I'm going to be able to get this to go. Oh no, I can't quit. All right. Um, I do have a start from another project that I worked on. So yes, I still use the tracking. Um, what it feels like is it feels incredible. The day that I wrote, I'm going to just quickly hide the comment here so you can see here. The day that I wrote that 11,390 words, like I just felt like I couldn't stop. And in fact, the only reason I did stop is because my mom came to get me and said, we have to go do a thing. So I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I'm technically traveling with you, mother, so I will go and do the thing with you. And that's the only reason why I stopped. I could have kept going. I maybe would have got I might have finished the book that day. I might have gotten another 8,759 words. What it feels like is it feels incredible. And when you get into that zone, when you know what you're going to write before you write it, you know when you're most productive and you trust yourself to do it, and you let yourself sink into that kind of fictive dream that I sink into when I'm writing. And I don't know if you do, but the way I do it, um, it feels like I'm reading the book. I'm not writing it. It's just coming out of my fingers, and I don't even think about it consciously anymore. I'm just living it. And that feels absolutely incredible. And you don't need to have multiple hours to do that. In that 2,500 words, I absolutely was inside that fictive dream. That's what I call it. What was my word count normally before this? Um, Terrible. 200 words a day, 100 words a day, basically mostly 0 words a day, being completely honest. Okay, from Leon. Good morning, Leon. You've done everything you've outlined for 1K to 3K days, but not in one section. Is it a combination of morning and evening writing blocks? So how do you get to 10K? Do you add another block? Um, what you need to do is find that time that you are the most productive and try to maximize it. So, and I know that not everyone can do this because, most of us have jobs. However, if you realize that you're most productive between 10 and 4, then you can write between 10 and 4 on the weekend, or try to block that time off, one day a week, or, one day every couple of weeks. And with that combination of knowledge, time, and enthusiasm, then you will find your word count increases. You're a ponderer, so it takes you some time. Do you usually ponder, or words just go out once you've viewed your notes? Um, so the way I personally do it, I write out what I'm going to write that day. I'm sitting in my spot in my time. I know what I want to do, and I just let the story take over. I don't edit, I don't do anything. I try to have it so that it feels like I'm in that fictive dream that I was describing earlier, where it's like I'm reading the book. So if you're a ponderer, that is fantastic. Try to save it for the editing. Just get the words on the page, and then you can go back and make them amazing afterward. You know, um, the there's kind of this notion that writing quickly means you're not writing well. That's not necessarily true. It just depends on how you hear the story as it comes to you. At least that's for me. So I wouldn't say I'm a ponderer. I'd say I'm a person who likes to sink into that fictive dream and let the story come out of me. Um, it's like, I think Tolkien had a great analogy with fairy stories about how he would just settle into this dream and let the fairies come and tell their stories in front of him, and he just write them down. And that's kind of what it's like for me. I don't know how else to describe it. But once you start being productive, and try to see if you can slip into that mindset, or whatever mindset you find you're most productive at. How does balancing life writing affect output? So 100% for me, I do, and I know that most people can't do this, but I'm lucky enough that I do, because I get lots of time off with the military, especially over the Christmas block. I tend to write on vacation as much as possible. I find that that gives me the chance to block off those sections of time to actually do it. So what I will do when I know I'm going on a vacation is I will, unless I'm editing, in which case I'll edit, but I will say, okay, this is what story do I want to tell, and I will use my time before I go to come up with that. And then when I'm actually on vacation, as you see here, like I can pound the book out in 8 to 10 days. So, for a lot of people, if you take that 2 week vacation and you are fortunate enough to not have to be responsible for someone else's happiness during that time, then that is a great time to do it. Otherwise, I suggest, your weekends are your best chance to do it. A lot of the time, I do feel really tired from work. You know, all of us have lives, all of us work hard, um, and it's easy to come home, and believe me, it's very easy because this is how I live my life 90% of the time, and it's one of the things I'm working on trying to change. It's easy to come home and say, I'm tired, I want to recharge, I'm going to watch TV, have dinner, go to bed, play a video game, relax so that I can be ready to go back to work. But one of the things that I found recently is, even though I forced myself to write when I didn't want to, once I started going and I settled into that fictive dream, I actually felt more refreshed and recharged, and it makes me want to write more on the weekends because it's more refreshing and fulfilling than playing a video game or watching TV. Do I penalize myself for missing productivity goals? Do I try to make up missed days by doubling up, or move on with a fresh start daily? Absolutely move on with a fresh start daily. And again, this is methods 2K to 10K, but really the point is to increase your word count. It's not to hit 10,000 words a day. If you can do that, great. It feels amazing. But what you want ultimately to do is make sure you're writing as efficiently as you can. And if you've already found out how to write as efficiently as you can, try these methods, try changing it up a little bit. But if you're already there, then that's fantastic, and you should keep doing what you're doing, because again, like, the point is not to follow this just as a means to an end to hit 10,000 words a day, because not everyone can do that. The point is to try these methods, try changing things up in your life and in your environment, in your writing habit, so that you can absolutely um, make sure that you're making the most out of your time, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm really answering your question there, Leon, but if not, then let me know and I'll come back to it. No, I personally do not, because editing is really hard to measure, right? So, if you wrote a 300,000 word book and you need to get it down to 60,000 words because it's romance, then maybe you could measure how many words you took out. But um, one of the things you want to do with this is use the kind of the SMART goals method. So, SMART being specific, attainable, with a time orientation, as and reachable. So, you need to actually have something you can measure. And for me, when I'm editing, I don't, like, if I'm going around and I'm changing words, it's really hard to know a way to measure your productivity, when, at least for me, when I'm editing. Now, however, if you have an idea of how I could measure productivity while I'm editing, because again, for me, it's like word count. Word count when you're drafting is really easy to measure. The number goes up, hopefully. If it goes down, then you're having problems. But with editing, sometimes, like in this book here, it's not quite at the word count target I set for it. So the word count needs to go up a little bit, but also, you don't want it to go up too much. So it, yeah, I don't know how I would measure my productivity while doing that. However, you could still absolutely measure, your time and your locations, but I just don't know how you would use that data to find out when you're most efficient at your editing, unless you have a really specific way to measure your editing, if that makes sense. I mute myself here while I take a drink. Okay. Here's a method you can do. So productivity by chapter. How many chapters per hour do you edit? Um, that could be a very easy way to measure that productivity. For me, I don't think it would because I don't edit by chapter. I kind of edit by story arc, if that makes any sense. Again, it also depends what you're editing, right? Because if you're doing a structural edit, then yeah, you're doing it maybe by chapter. But if you're doing like a line edit, or sorry, if you're doing a structural edit, then you'd be doing it by story arc or how about other method. But if you're doing a line edit, then yeah, absolutely, that could totally make sense if you're like, okay, I'm going to start at the back and work my way forward, which is how I feel editing is best done. Um, my very first book that I wrote, I edited the first 3 or 4 chapters so many times that like there was a noticeable when I went to try to publish it. I'm like, oh, there's like once I get past chapter 4, like there's a noticeable decline in the quality. So I ended up having to like re-edit the back half of the book. So I suggest editing from back to front. It works for me. Give it a try. But yeah, like if you're doing line editing or or that sort of thing, then yeah, totally by chapter could be a great way to measure it, and I'll have to give that a shot once I get there. Great idea, definitely. Any other questions or comments or concerns or things you would like me to talk about or anything else? Yeah, PWA, yes, I totally do the same thing. It's like my last pass. Um, but yeah, when I get there, then yeah, I could totally do that. In case you don't know, PWA integrates with Scrivener now, which is fantastic. This is a great question. So when I'm doing my like mini plotting, I actually write out most of the what I'm going to write before I write it um, as my outline. So what I do is I go through and I will say, okay, I'm gonna write a story about a tree or whatever, and be like, okay, so what happens to the tree? It starts as a sproutling, and then it grows to a mighty tree, then it gets hit by lightning, then it gets the blight, and then it dies. Just an example. So I would say, okay, chapter 1 is going to be being a sproutling. Chapter 2 is being growing to a mighty tree. Chapter 3 is the hit by lightning, and then chapter 4 is getting the blight. Chapter 5 is kind of the end. And then so I'll make when I'll write that all out as like one document, and then I'll create my Scrivener file, and I'll be like, okay, I know roughly what each of the chapters is going to be. So I'll go in and make my chapters and my scenes, and then I'll be like, okay, this part's going to be scene 1, slap it in, scene 2, slap it in, scene 3, slap it in, and then when I actually go to do my writing, I'll take the okay, you're a sapling, and then I'll start saying, okay, what did it feel like to first poke your first leaf out of the ground, and blah blah blah, and then you'll fill out the rest of it right before I go to write it. Um, so I try to make sure that I know all of my chapters and sections before I get to even starting to write it. Um, one of the things that I've found and that I really actually kind of like as a planner is like in the book that has the chart that I can't show you because I'd have to restart Firefox. Um, I wrote a lot. It's a 100,000 word story. I wrote out a lot of plot stuff, stuck it in my notes, wrote the thing out, and then I found out as I was going through that like I was being done with chapters, but stuff still left. So I ended up having to like add extra chapters and scenes and take what I've said. I'm going to write in this chapter, copy it, stick it into a blank page, and make it a new chapter. So just adjust. Honestly, is what I'd recommend. Yeah, I hope that kind of addresses the point there. Seems doing and thought, but practice seems daunting. 80% potential consideration. Yeah, and that's kind of the point of this, especially the knowledge. So as I said, the knowledge section, people, if you only do one thing, do the knowledge. That is the probably the biggest factor that it'll increase your word count, and then everything else is just getting it is like polishing it, right? So yeah, knowing what you're going to write before you write, I think, is definitely the number one way to increase that word count, and then everything else, like I said, is just extra. Any other questions? All right. Well, probably let you out a little early, but I want to thank everyone here for coming to hear my little chat. I hope that what I've laid out here is useful. And if you want to know more, Rachel Aaron, whose method this is, wrote a fantastic little book, 2K to 10K, that I would absolutely recommend you check out. I don't think I actually have my copy of it sitting here at my desk, and I don't want to run away to find it. Um, I hope that this method helped you. Shoot, leave me a comment here on this video afterward, and just let me know how you did, because I'm super curious to find out if this method helps anybody else. Um, I found that writing up to the 10 or 11,000 words a day has changed the way that I write. Because like there's this practice, but knowing that I can do it, that knowing that you have the capability to write 11,000 words in 5.5 hours will change the way you think about yourself. And it's such a positive, it's such a positive reinforcement of knowing that yes, I actually am a writer, and yes, I actually can do this. Because you run into those times where you start to doubt yourself, but then you look at this chart. Like for me, I look at this chart and I'm like, wow, I can't believe that I actually can do this, but there's the evidence in black and white that I can. So again, when you hit those word counts that you have, I hope that they give you the same confidence boost that they did to me, and I hope that you double your word count and write more efficiently. We'll give one last pause here for any saved Browns, as we would say in the military. Any final points, questions, thoughts, concerns? All right. Well, if anything comes up, you can leave a note. And again, my name's Joe, and I'd like to thank you for coming to my little talk about Rachel Aaron's 2K 10K method, and I hope you find it helpful. Enjoy the rest of your time at AWC. Thank you very much for Kay for being on mod for me. Don't forget to fill out that feedback form and hopefully win some prizes. I am actually giving away 2 copies of the book of my book, Mars Hill, which is a new adult romantic tragedy. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks very much.